When I was a kid, I loved Arbor Day because I was just thinking of the evergreens.
Yeah, I know. I think they stopped doing it.
How do why?
I don't know.
Well, on the fishing pier, I
Yeah, we
have
used to
him
get
up
one every
with
year.
one of the
Loved
sunrise
Yeah.
photo shoots I did. And he was standing right there on
Wow.
top, and he's looking right over like this. Really cool. I'll send you the one with the lily pads.
Okay.
That'll be.
This could be quite a meeting.
Yeah, and it looks like there's not a signal.
What?
Looks like there's no signal for the computer.
It's magic.
Use your touch.
Yep.
Linda, do you need to sign in? Do you need to sign in for our PowerPoint?
Every time I look at that, I think of a car grill.
30s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you consider so many of the car badges of that time were family shields, it probably was what they were replicating.
Probably.
Nate Pritchard is coming up, he's still parking.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
It'll be all right. It'll be all right.
Yeah, and, John is coming up as well,
All right.
Are we having problems with this thing?
What thing?
Yeah.
All of our streams say county council presenter.
I think they got
That's what they all
locked out.
say.
Linda's trying to get
That's
it.
what's,
Oh, okay, cool.
We're good.
I don't know if we're good. Mm-hmm.
See that? Works.
Look at that, now we're all here, that's awesome.
I know we are. Should we wait for Nate, or should we just let him? He's not first on the list. I guess we can start, right? I know, I just thought maybe we should wait for Nate, but it's okay. All right, we'll start Energy, Environment, and Land Use Committee meeting on April 21st, 5 p.m. Is there any courtesy of the floor today?
There is. Lamont McClure, Bethlehem Township. We don't do a very good job of highlighting the green parts of our county. We have these presentations, people's eyes glaze over, and then we don't talk about them again. And I think it's very important as we are out in the public talking about the balance between economic development and job creation, which is very important, and the preservation of open space, environmentally sensitive land and farmland, that we emphasize that we have plans like this in the making. Now, I frustrate Brian because I have been and continue to be more about acquisition. So as much open space and environmentally sensitive land and farmland we can preserve while I'm here, that's what our emphasis is going to be, so that we can maintain this equilibrium. But there is so much green in Northampton County that we do not emphasize. And I think it's very important. And I'm so glad, Madam Chair, that you you shine a light on the fact that there is so much going on. And when Sherry and Brian present to you about this really dramatic play, which I think future county executives and county councils will see through to its fruition, because it really is a big deal. This is important that we tell folks, because everyone is so concerned, and rightfully concerned, about truck traffic and warehouse proliferation, that we need to tell them. We need to tell a better story about what it is we're doing to push back against that. So thank you for indulging me about that, because our future is green, and our green future is in part here in the Greenway. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Executive McClure. Any other courtesy of the floor? Seeing as there's none, I'd like to call up Brian and Sherry to do the review of the Mincy Lake Corridor Plan.
Good afternoon. We're here about a year and a half in the making now for the Mincy Lake Greenway and Stewardship Plan. We first received the DCNR grant for half the funding of this, and we're now at the final draft plan to present to council tonight. It is on our website, the executive summary, the plan, and all appendices under Mincy Lake Corridor. On the left-hand side, there's a tab that you can go to. That's up, it's live right now, and we're going to leave it up for about another 2-3 weeks. And then after we get you a resolution for adoption, it'll take its place fully there. But I'm going to let Sherry go through the details of the plan, and I just want to focus in on when we first started this plan, we wanted to look at all 1,100 plus acres in the Mincy area. It consists of 4 different parks, really, county parks. We have Bear Swamp, Jarrow Seafood, Bear Swamp, and Archery Complex. We have Mincy Lake itself. We have the Tots Gap Conservation Area. And in the northern portion, we have our Tots Gap Swamp Conservation Area. And you'll hear a little bit about each of those individual areas and how they got broken out, studied both for environmental impacts and necessities for goals and recommendations, but also the recreation use of the area as well. As I mentioned in past months and years, this area is about, or not, maybe even larger than Jacobsburg State Park itself. So putting it on a regional scale, we have really one of our own state parks that we help manage. There's been tremendous efforts between our nonprofit partners for land preservation in this specific area, mainly around the vernal pools. It's one of the largest concentrations of vernal pools within the state of the state of Pennsylvania. So we really had to balance the recreation and the conservation. And I think this plan really pulls it together. And what's neat is, for the first time ever, there's a climate impact component in this. How do we build infrastructure around this when we have increases of water and flooding? How do we look at the changing forest aspects? So those types of things are all put into this plan. And it's a very unique, forthright coming plan that through Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, we were able to put this together and kind of pilot project this as a brand new planning aspect throughout the state. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sherry Acevedo. She's our conservation coordinator, and she's really been the project manager behind this planning effort for the past year and a half now.
Thanks, Brian.
Great.
Thank you, Brian. The quirks of being short, right? As Brian had said, we're very blessed with having our partner of the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources as a funding partner that has helped us with this. And they really helped us to go outside the box. The main purpose of this plan is to really blend the aspects of a greenway, a stewardship plan, master site plan, and a climate change impact analysis. Typically, these plans are funded through the state, through DCNR, as separate standalone plans. In this case, we were able to blend, because of the special uniqueness of this corridor, we were able to blend all of them into our scope of work that went into this plan, and that's our final result. Our biggest thing to look at with this Greenway and Stewardship Plan is the compatibility of our environmentally sensitive species of our green areas, along with the compatibility of appropriate outdoor recreation where applicable. The goals that we had the consultant focus on is this compatibility, not only with our resource protection, but also the outdoor recreation, in addition to our sensitive environmental habitat conservation. We have, within this area in Upper Mount Bethel Township, about 80% of our natural heritage inventory of sensitive species that exist within our bi-county area. We have these resources that we manage and that we own. We also looked at the recommendations for the conservation management. One of the other features was an interconnected trail. So you will see through the presentation, not only within each of the management units, but where throughout the entire corridor, how can we connect in addition to our external trail networks of how we can make these linkages happen, in addition to the recommendations for infrastructure improvements. The plan process, an extensive public participation process. We had about a 15 to 20 member steering committee that assisted us with this. They helped with the brainstorming. We had 6 committee meetings. There were 4 public meetings. There was additional outreach that the consultant did. They were up at the lake one of the days. They had poster boards. They were up there for about 6 to 8 hours last summer. In addition, they were also at our Northampton County Festival last fall, gathering and gaining input. We also went out with them as a team, as staff, went out on multiple site visits and site assessments, because that's one of the first things in the foundation of a plan is to look at and identify all of your existing conditions. When they look at the size of the area, they determined that they're going to break it up into 7 management units. These are distinctive units that are focused on throughout the plan. So everything that you see in each of the chapters are the existing conditions, demographics, which goes into the generality of the region, but it goes into the specifics of what each of these management units have. What are their special features? What existing recreational opportunities are there? And what are the species that are existing with the wildlife observations, in addition to the different surveys and assessments and the scientific data that was collected. And that's all inclusive within this 1,100 acres. So when you see these 7 areas, and what we had them do with the first 2, the Gerald Siegfried Bear Swamp and Archery Complex, we had them break that down into 2 subunits because they're on both sides of the street along Mincy Lake Drive. Then they focused on Mincy Lake, the Vernal Pools area, Tots Gap, Twin Lakes, and Tots Gap Swamp, which is the northernmost area. So they basically went in succession.
Can you go back to that for a second?
Absolutely.
See, there are, I know that a lot of times we try to preserve things that are contiguous. So there's a little patch of blue right in between the Vernal Pools and Tots Gap. Can you just tell us if that is something that we are going to acquisition in the future? Is that on the slate? What is it? What's the status of that property?
So the areas that you see are the private parcels that have some of the outlines. Part of the recommendations that are in the plan is to continue our natural resource protection. So in a public document like this, you really don't, because of landowner negotiations and everything, you don't want to necessarily call out every individual property owner, but you want to have an idea of where they are. But part of the main recommendations that they do have is to continue the preservation effort, whether that is a conservation easement or fee simple acquisition.
Yeah, because there are ways that they can maintain ownership of the property and still preserve that area.
Through a conservation easement.
Yeah.
Fee simple acquisition is 100% acquisition. We would retain ownership or a local partner.
I just wanted to point that one area out.
Good question. I want to highlight some of the major chapters that we have that we really focused on as part of the recommendations. This is our chapter 5, which is the Greenway and Trails. As you can see here, within the network, the external trail systems that we have, the county a few years ago prepared a feasibility study for the Northern Tier Trail. This is linking the Delaware River to the Lehigh River, all in our northern trail, all in our northern municipal communities at the base of the Blue Mountain or the Kittatinny Ridge. So there's connections to the Northern Tier Trail because those concepts were given to the consultant as our existing planning document. The proposed Liberty to Water Gap Trail, which will go from Portland Borough up to Delaware Water Gap Borough. Unfortunately, following along 611, Route 611, that's one of the other trail networks. As you can see in the bottom area, the existing Plainfield Trail, that's part of the Two Rivers Area Trailway that will go from, that currently exists from Easton all the way up to the Plainfield Township area. If you remember our conservation easement and trail easement that we purchased last year, that's to help us with the northern connection of that trailway. So there are linkages all within here as part of the regional trail network. So we wanted them to look at how do we make the linkages within the 1,100 acres? Because right now we have there's segmented pieces of little trail sections that exist and other trail sections that don't. One of the ways that they recommended of how we can make that happen, as you can see in the most linear line that's pretty straight from south to north, is along the multiple utility right-of-ways that we have, Med-Ed, PPL, along those utility corridors. So they are a wonderful reuse of having trails within those corridors. So that's one of the ways. Because while balancing the sensitive species, there are certain areas that they are recommending to keep trails and some of the public access out of to protect these green spaces and the environmentally sensitive species. So you can see around Mincy Lake, our existing trails that we have in Bear Swamp area, and then heading up north into the National Park Service Drive, there are earthen trails. And that's one of the other things that we talked to them about and that we heard a lot of feedback is to retain the rural character of the area and to be cautious of the sensitivity of the environment, to utilize different trail surfaces or existing trail surfaces like an earthen to not impact those resources. Here are the options that they gave us, because in some areas, for instance, our existing trail that Fish and Boat Commission built on top of the spillway in the dam, in that case, it made sense. It's a high-use area. You already have activity that's going on. That is an example of a paved trail. In these other areas, the predominant recommendations are the earthen surface or the aggregate or the crushed limestone surface. There's a term called accessible route. It is an ADA accessible linkage to get you from the accessible parking spot and your parking area to a facility. Maybe it's a pavilion, maybe it's a trail, maybe it's another connection like to the archery range. So that's what's defined as an archery route. ADA accessible guidelines can be crushed stone or can be asphalt, but it calls for different trail segments to have specific trail materials that are compatible within that area. This is one of the biggest chapters, is the site-wide specific recommendations. So when you review the report online, it's set up as a PDF. And the way when the final plan is done and printed, it's supposed to look like an open book. So on one side, you're going to have cost figures, and on another side, you're going to have a map or text. So it's either cost figures or text. So that's the way it's supposed to look for each of the management units. The way it's also broken out is it's broken out by ecological recommendations, which are part of the wildlife and the plant life, in addition to, and the birds, in addition to the actual recommendations for facilities, trails, signage, those types of things. So there's 2 series of maps in each chapter per management unit. So within the archery complex, one of the biggest recommendations, of course, is the archery range, to rehabilitate the range, upgrade the parking lot, put ADA accessible parking in, upgrade the trails, and even the targets, and reroute the trails. So as you can see in this map here, where the red X's are actually a relocation, recommendation to not continue that trail, but relocate it to the shorter loop that you have. The little hash marks, those are the existing archery targets that are already out there as part of the hunt course. So they're recommending upgrading of those facilities and a possible relocation.
So those little yellow hash marks. Those are the archery, like where the archery is? Is that what you're saying?
Where there's two different archery things. In the parking lot, adjacent to the parking lot, is the actual large shooting range. That's your biggest target. And then within the trail, within the woods, are smaller targets. And it's part of the hunt course that you can go on. There's about 12 of them.
Yeah, I see why you're-
So one of the biggest things in any type of plan is to have a recommendation that's noted. That's how we access future funding from grant sources, multiple grant sources, is you actually have to identify the page number, you have to identify the area, and have some kind of schematic map and language that goes along with it. So we ensured that that happened, especially in this plan, with the magnitude of it. And this is a plan, it's not necessarily, going to be all done in one day. This is a plan that's going to be for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So it's a long-term. You have short-term goals all the way through long-term goals. At Bear Swamp, here's an example to show you of the ecological units. So what you see here where they have the circles, that could be an ecological restoration of the meadow. Right now, it's turf grass that's in Olympic Field as the meadow. One of the recommendations is to convert it to native warm season grasses and wildflower mix, and then cut mowed paths through that as part of the trail system. And you could see the example of, that's the ecological cost estimates that goes along with that map.
It's very small.
It is for this, but it's just for presentation purposes because it'd be huge. But when you get into the details of the plan, it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet because it's standalone. Cost estimates are on one side and the map is on the other. So that way, the maps are going to be formatted as 11.5 by 17 or 11 by 17. So they will be fold out.
Oh, okay.
So the plan is basically going to be like this, and the map folds out. So that way, this side, you're going to have the costs, and then the map will be accompanied off outside of the book. It's one of the most effective ways because of the size of each of these areas and the recommendations that you see. There's a lot of details, so you need, in order for readability, you need to have the larger size. So within Bear Swamp, the other recommendation that they're providing is a rehabilitation or a replacement of our existing boardwalk. They're recommending a couple of different materials, whether that's a Trex material, which is similar to a recycled plastic, whether it's metal or if it's wooden again. But they did provide that as part of the upgrades that would need to be done. They also had recommending taking the open air nature center that we have as existing, moving that closer to the existing pavilion, so that way it could be utilized as an environmental education space and an outdoor classroom. So all of these things took everything into consideration of the use and the reuse of each of these areas, of how we can improve upon them. So here's one of the concepts, two of the concepts actually. This is Olympic Field. We have the existing pole that's there for electric purposes. A lot of Boy Scout camporees have been hosted here over the years, a lot of different events. But this is a sample of a schematic. A schematic design basically gives you a concept wonderful for us for showcasing, along with any type of application that we want to provide. This would be inclusive with that. In addition to the boardwalk, it gives you an idea of also incorporating some of the benches that would be along it, and this is one of the recommendations of the metal bench. The top picture that you see is what the existing structure looks like. It can get a little slippery because you are basically on top of a wetland, and you're walking through it, which is very unique to begin with as well. In Mincy Lake, we have the lake trail, which goes from the west shore to the east shore, and down the road, when the pedestrian bridge is built, it'll be fully connected. So there are recommendations to improve that. In addition, to have connections on the bottom area to the other management units, which would be Bear Swamp. There used to be a red trail that existed along Stone Way, and there was a little piece of an old former railroad bed that exists. But again, looking at what our existing recreation improvements are that we have already completed, but also the improvements that are in the works. So they gave us, as a next step, as like a phase 3, here is a nice schematic of within the embankment at the picnic area that we have, a nice nature-based play area. So it gives you a little bit of a visual of before and after and how that can be enhanced, especially with the current enhancements that are looked at this time for the picnic area and improvements to that. So as we upgrade, we look at all the facilities in mind and those different uses. Here you can see too with the road crossings, this is an idea of when you have a road crossing, a safe pedestrian road crossing, the signalization or the signage that would be in existence. Some of the roads that are not as heavily traveled do not need the signalization that you would see, for instance, down on College Hill, Lafayette College, where they're flashing. And you have the pedestrian linkage there. In this case, it would just be the yellow signs like you see on the Plainfield Township Trail. They have them within their multiple crossings. That would be similar to what we would be doing up at Mincy Lake. This is the vernal pools section, and as you can see, lots of different hydrology, lots of water, lots of springs, lots of seeps, and lots of vernal pools. What a vernal pool basically is in the springtime, as we get the rain, like we've been seeing recently, you have a depression area that basically fills up with water. And then through the summer, it basically dries up. It's not a full pond, it's not a continuous running stream or creek, but it is basically a small depression that has the wetland habitat, it has the plant, but it also has the frogs, the salamanders, and that's where they lay their eggs. And this is one of the biggest concentrations that we have in the state within this area. Nature Conservancy owns some of it, and we own a lot of it. In this case, they are recommending the least public access within this area to keep people out of the vernal pools for the protection of those amphibians and those reptiles. So this is an example of one of the recommendations of going up the power line and focusing on that, which we would have to work with and negotiate with the power line company on that easement.
Is that Med Ed?
There's a couple of them.
Oh, okay.
Tots Gap, lots of activities. We have our current osprey that are back renesting again, and we have the meadows that exist within that area, looking at some future potential enhancements. One of the biggest things with the Tots Gap area is the fact that they are giving us their recommendations, and they're giving us these schematics of what could be. However, when the county acquired this portion of the property from Dr. Wolf, one of the things is the Nature Conservancy holds a conservation easement on this property. So anything that's done, as far as any future planning efforts or anything else, will have to be, and they were inclusive with this process right from the beginning, they would have to sign off and approve to make sure it's consistent with the goals, just like we put deed restrictions in all of our conservation easements and our acquisitions, and the same with our grantees. They did the same with us. And they monitor this. They gave us our annual monitoring reports. But anything that'll be done in this area, we definitely need some further evaluation. Nature Conservancy has been with us all along, very supportive of these efforts, very excited to see some future possibilities. But again, it's beyond this scope of this project at this point. But at least we have a starting point for a discussion that we can have internally, but also with them. Twin Lakes. One of the biggest issues we have here at Twin Lakes is a lot of illegal ATV use. So one of the things that they're recommending, bollards, education process, work with the locals on keeping them out of the area, because there's a lot of little streams that are here, stream segments, and a lot of wetlands that they love going through. So we do need to make sure that that is addressed. A lot of different methods that they had given us as part of the enforcement, but also just education and outreach, because it happens. And ATVs are in this area, but we have to further define it. And they gave us some nice signage recommendations throughout the entire corridor to help improve it, because this is very rustic. In this area, you're in the middle of the woods, you may not even know which area that you're in. The signage will help identify the location that you're in and what's allowable and what the uses are. This is the northernmost section. We call it the Tots Gap Swamp. It goes back to the Natural Heritage Inventory. This is up on National Park Service Drive. Adjacent to us is, in this area, let me use the cursor, right here. Oh, you can't see it on there. North of National Park Service Drive is Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. So they are our adjacent landowner that we can also, again, with further evaluation, look at future connections with them to the Appalachian Trail. Slateford Creek runs through here. Another high important conservation area, beautiful rhododendrons. We have a partnership, an existing partnership in multiple parks, but especially up here with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, with the 400s program. So cooperative access for hunting programs, in addition to habitat improvements in multiple areas within this corridor and in other parks and preserves within our county system. This is one of the heaviest concentrated areas where that partnership exists. So looking at the enhancements there, and we've been working with the Game Commission on that. The programming opportunities focused on the education and environmental education and recreation programs. And this can be done in a lot of different ways. We kept it very general, but then we also went into very defined. So there can be themed programs and there can be activities. And this is a combination of what we call independent, where someone can go out as a trail user, as a family, and they can look at interpretive signage as part of their education effort, outreach, or, so it's independently driven, or it can be group organized. So for instance, our existing partnership we have with Wildlands Conservancy, they can lead some hikes, they can do some orienteering, they could do some astronomy nights, they could do some nature photography, whatever it is, they can host those programs that would be planned, that would be posted on the website, and people can come out as an organized group activity. One of the other things we looked at is within each of the management units, what specific things, themed activities, STEM activities that we could do that relate. So for instance, at Bear Swamp, for the archery, there can be some camps that are done. There can be some youth camps. There can be some competitions that are done, like the Bow Fest that was hosted for many years in partnership with the Sportsman's Federation. So we also looked at what are those programming opportunities specific to each of the management units. The probable costs for the improvements, this is total costs inclusive, and that includes the ecological, the facilities, the trails, and the signage. That's how the costs are all broken out in each of the management units. And they gave us the total cost of over $10 million. However, that is a lot of phases, a lot of years, and that is a lot of different facility upgrades, whether that's picnic pavilions, parking areas, and all the associated things that would go along with that. So actually, it's pretty, from my perspective, a professional opinion, it's pretty good. I was expecting to see actually higher. So we are in really good shape with that. But they also gave us the long term in working with, like, the Nature Conservancy and NPA Game Commission, all of our ecological goals, whether that's invasive plant removal, whether that's spot treatment of those invasive plants, and the ecological restoration projects that we could do throughout the corridor. Here is the examples they gave us of this, we call the signage family. Aesthetically pleasing, it fits really nice within the area, and you have your three-sided kiosks, your trailblazers, and your directional signages all throughout the corridor. What we also did, feeding off of those recommendations, is we also looked at what are our top priorities that we want to focus on and that we would like to implement. So within the Gerald E. Siegfried Bear Swamp Park and Archery Complex, and this is Management Unit 1, this is the recommendations that they provided in the schematic. Upgrades and enhancements to the parking lot, making ADA accessible spots as defined, an accessible route, hence like a paved trail, upgrades to the archery range, and also creating a garden space. You could see in the existing picture the turf grass, so upgrading that to native plants, so that way that can be like a nice little picnic area for people. So if the family comes out, someone's shooting at the, or they're doing their target practice with their archery and their bow, family members can be off into the trail areas, but also into this grassy area that has the native grasses and wildflowers. The second priority within the same area is the Bear Swamp Management Unit, and that is an additional parking lot, which would be on the opposite side. This would be a new parking lot that they were recommending. Taking the open air nature center, clustering it, combining it over at the pavilion, and making a nature-based play space. So that way that can be for environmental education programming purposes. Wildlands Conservancy hosts camps in the summertime. They rotate between our parks. It's a free service for our youth, for the residents within the county. And that could be one of the new areas, once those upgrades are done, that could be one of the new areas that they could go to, because then they would have the shelter. Mincy Lake, if you've ever been to Wildlife Refuge or down at the beach or any other areas that have heavy concentration of migratory birds, marshlands, any type of habitat like that, they have these observation platforms. And that's what's recommended off the west shore. There's a little cove as you're walking along in the first 1,500 feet of the lake trail. It'd be a beautiful area. You could see where the circle is. That's where it's proposed. And basically to have an ADA accessible boardwalk leading you to there, and then have this observation area, so that way people can sit and enjoy, just enjoy the wildlife, sunrise, sunset, whatever it is. But that's one of the big recommendations as a priority up at Mincy Lake within that management unit. Within the vernal pools, one of the things that they brought to us is the technique, because of the amphibians and the reptiles we just had in spring. A couple weeks ago, we were out actually helping them across the road, and Upper Mount Bethel Township worked with us as a partner to do a road closure. That was one of the recommendations from this plan, so we were very happy that they worked with us on that. But this is another tool that we could use of having this tunnel that goes underneath. kind of like the Hackett's Park pedestrian bridge that goes across 22. This kind of helps go underneath the roadway. So any small animals could go through as well, but then there wouldn't be a kill. The night that we were out when it was raining, there was 3 of us. There was over 200 species between spring peepers, spotted salamanders, frogs, everything else that we helped get across the road within a few hours. So it just goes to show you the amount and the magnitude that they're basically going to breed and lay their eggs from one side of the road to the other to the vernal pools. That's the whole effort, is to get them into the vernal pools. So they've identified on here specific areas where you see the green bridge type symbol. That's where this would be proposed for these underpasses, these amphibian tunnels or underpasses.
Oh, so there's like 5 of them?
Yeah, at least. Yep. And there could be more. Again, as we do further evaluations to look at that, where they could be migrating, there could be a need for more.
Yeah, I also see some solar panels on this building. That's kind of interesting.
Again, it's their recommendation that they provided to us for the Tots Gap Management Unit to enhance the area and also build off of environmental education. We have the osprey nest that's there, and again, just focusing in on what the conservation goals are and what we can do as part of any type of upgrades. Twin Lakes, there is not really a defined parking area. So one of the things that they recommended, because we do have some other low use that's there, but to have positive use, which will help deter some of this illegal ATV use away, is to create a defined small parking area. It would be a 5-car parking area that would exist, low-key, crushed stone, nothing, extravagant where it's fully paved, anything like that. But at least it could provide some access. And maybe there'd be some scheduled programs there. Same thing with up at Tots Gap. They had recommended at least 1 to 2 of these 5-car parking areas, because currently hunters and trail users are parking along National Park Service Drive. If you've traveled it, it's not a very heavily used road or thoroughfare, but in this case, we would have a defined parking area that would have our typical, your gates and everything else and bollards, so that way it keeps people from driving on the rest of the land, but then it could be, it's accessible for people and having a defined space. The end of the plan, that is, because the plan is so large and the resolution is so huge, there is a separate appendices. And this is the list of the appendices, so it includes the climate change. The climate change impact analysis is built into the plan, but then the data behind it of the vegetation and the birds, all of those lists of inventories of what they identified in the field as part of the wildlife biologist, those reports and that background data are all in this. Public meeting notes, all of our committee meeting notes, lots of different things. And we also included the county resolution that you passed last year for the renaming of the park. So we were in the process of the plan, and as that came on, we had them include it and then change the name. So that way everything was inclusive with the 2 subunits.
So when you give us this resolution, it's going to contain all those appendices?
Excuse me?
When you give us the resolution for this plan?
Oh, no, the resolution for the plan is the recommendation to adopt it, that you're accepting and adopting the final plan.
Right, okay, is that all going to be included in it? No.
No, the resolution that I just referred to was the Gerald Siegfried, the renaming, that is inclusive within the back of this plan.
Okay, I'll save my question.
Okay,
I think it's confusing right now. It's okay.
okay.
Go ahead.
So on the website, as Brian had mentioned, the 3 documents do exist. They always prepare an executive summary, so that is something that we can hand out, especially to our funding agencies and to anybody else, as an educational tool, which shows the map, the 7 management units, and it focuses on succinctly all of the goals within the plan that I covered here even tonight. It also has the full plan. It is like a 300-page document, and the appendices is there as well. So we encourage you to look at that. It's now under review currently with DCNR, which is part of our grant process. They did review the draft plan now as the final draft, like you're doing. They're in the process of reviewing it as well.
And what's the step after the reviews are done?
If there's any comment, you provide them to me in writing, and then you pass the resolution, the draft resolution. You pass the resolution that would fully adopt the plan.
That's what I was getting.
And then that completes the project, so then we can release the final money to the consultant, and then we can prepare our closeout report for DCNR, so we can get reimbursed for our funding, half of our funding.
So essentially, that 300-page document is going to have to be adopted by resolution.
You're adopting the whole plan.
Right.
The whole plan basically is yes,
Okay.
yes.
Because that's what Brian said at the beginning.
Yep.
He said needs a resolution to be adopted. So when can we expect that?
In 2 weeks or for the next EEL.
Really? In May?
We're ready to, we're just waiting for our final comments from DCNR, and we
Right.
wanted to present tonight.
Right.
Not provide the resolution, and we're not ready to
Right.
have it fully adopted, but
Wow,
it's
that's
the final draft plan. And
Okay, great. I didn't realize that the comments would be done and then we'd be ready, but that's great.
Yep.
Any questions? Super awesome. I think that you should be very proud of this plan. It looks extensive, and I want to mention that there is a function at Mincy Lake this weekend from 5 to 7. It's an art show. Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
It's at Bangor High School.
Oh, is it Bangor?
It's a presentation from a local artist from 5 to 7. Friends of Mincy Lakes holding a benefit fundraiser for all the projects that have been going on.
Right, so I just wanted to mention that to help promote that, because it does help promote Mincy Lake too, and all the work that you've done, because it's part of the art sphere as well. So that's really exciting.
Do you know who the artist is?
I could look it up on Facebook real quickly. I believe it's Lisa something. I don't have the flyer with me.
Go ahead.
I heard that we have priorities, and I understand we pass this resolution, we adopt our plan. At what point do you see yourself actually building a timeline for these projects? I mean, I know you have priorities kind of laid out, but, I mean, is that something that happens shortly? You start actually, I mean, I know there's priorities, but really define timeline of when some of these things start and finish. How far down the road is that?
Well, we've already started implementing recommendations from this plan. The improvements at Mincy Lake, the fish habitat, the accessible kayak launch and fishing piers, all of those are built into here. The restoration work that's going on in the meadows, the bird boxes, the cooperation with Game Commission, those are already going on. So we'll really get into the plans. We'll probably look at low-hanging fruit, some trails that we can blaze and get out there. The other ones are going to take time. We'll need grants. We'll need funding to do those. But the archery complex seems to be really one of the high priority ones moving forward after we get the additional recreation components around Mincy Lake finished.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. All right, so our next is a presentation regarding Bushkill Creek, updates from the Karst Geology Advisory Council. Thank you, Nate, for showing up.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. I'm Nate Pritchard, watershed specialist with Northampton County Conservation District, although I'm here tonight as the lead for the Karst Geology Advisory Council. I didn't have a enough lead time to prepare a PowerPoint for tonight, but I do have a handout with a couple, just a couple pages, so it might be good to follow along. Should I?
I think you could give it to Aileen.
I think of it just enough for. Wait for those to get passed out. Actually, I'll just kind of go over this, the first page here briefly. I just want to provide a brief kind of timeline recap as far as where we've been coming from, where we've been for the advisory council. So we were, of course, created by the county council resolution in August of 2020. We started meeting shortly thereafter. In December of 2020, Bootsy Unichem, who is the company that operates the quarry along the Bushkill Creek near Stockertown, submitted documentation for deepening quarry operations to sea level. This is one issue that has been talked about in this committee and at County Council before. The short version, again, to recap that, is that the quarry has for many years had a permit that allows them to quarry down to sea level in 50-foot lifts. However, every time they do another 50 feet deeper, they have to meet certain criteria from Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, DEP. And this would be then the trigger for their final 50 feet down to the full depth of 0 feet sea level, down another 50 feet. So they submitted their documentation for that application. As DEP was reviewing that, Northampton County Council requested DEP hold a public hearing on comments on that application. DEP granted that request. They held a public hearing in June, and I'll go over some of the results from that in this presentation. And then in October of 2021, DEP issued their formal response to that application. And then in March of this year, just last month, Bootsy replied to that with their comments, or with their responses to those comments, rather. So I'll move on to the next page there. And again, this is a very brief presentation because we're still digesting a lot of this. But to recap what was commented on by the various agencies in this application, PADEP listed 33 different deficiencies in their response in October of 2021. Now, when they say deficiency, it doesn't necessarily mean that something is absolutely wrong or that wouldn't stop the application. Some of them were significant. Some of them were minor things like please include, more information on figures and things like that. PennDOT, as part of that process, the Department of Transportation provided 4 additional recommendations. That, again, they're in the picture because of the Route 33 bridge is a major project right next to the quarry, and there is some influence on groundwater in the area because of that. We've talked about, I think, in the past, the bridge replacement. Again, that's another long conversation, but for those, anybody not aware, PennDOT is currently redesigning the 33 bridge. They have a preliminary design, and I think they're going through permitting right now, but they're going through seeing how this would possibly influence that project. Pennsylvania Fish and Boat, as part of the permit review process, also has provided some comments. And then at the public hearing, we had, I think it was a very successful hearing. I did listen in on, I didn't comment myself, but there were 14 different commenters and 98 comments. So I'm obviously not going to go over through all those comments today or all the deficiencies for all these reports, but you get the idea of the volume of response that hearing provided. And then in Bootsy's response to those comments, they produced a 102-page report with additional 140 pages of figures and tables. It's very technical information. We're still digesting it, so we will not be going over that response in detail today. There's a lot of deep hydrology, some historical review as far as the sinkhole history. There's a tracer study, which I can comment on a little bit tonight, a dye tracer study, which was done. But I wanted to just update some of the public comments, the responses to the public comments that were part of this response. I think because that was obviously the primary interest was the interest of the public from the county council, and picking out a few of those 98 comments that were perhaps pertinent. So I did, now a lot of those comments when you look through them, some of them were similar ones that were asked again and again, but three primary, topics that were brought up repeatedly were these 3 bullet points here, and I'll just read them off for the sake of completeness. But the first bullet point there is actually comment number 3 in those 98 comments, and the way that was listed by the Excel table that these were provided in is that the claim that the Bushkill Creek is an intermittent stream is incorrect. So that was a comment from the public to DEP, to the hearing. That is going back to the question as far as when Bootsy presented, I believe it was to the committee here some time ago. There's back and forth as far as, is the Bushkill Creek an intermittent stream or perennial stream? That is, does it naturally dry up or does it run all year? And as part of this process, Bootsy basically has some back and forth with DEP in their comments, and they're sort of walking back whether the fact that it's an intermittent stream or perennial stream is relevant. It seems like that in their response. And I'll read that off there. The response to that comment is that the department, I believe referring to Pennsylvania DEP, notes that Bootsy incorrectly characterizes the Bushkill Creek as an intermittent stream in their application. Based on the department's interpretation of perennial stream in Chapter 77, which is the regulations that cover non-coal mining, i.e. limestone mining in this case, Bushkill Creek is a perennial stream. Nevertheless, both perennial and intermittent streams receive the same protections in Chapter 77 and 93, which Chapter 93 is cold water fishery, warm water fishery, all the stuff that we typically deal with stream quality. So, and the Bushkill Creek is designated as a high-quality cold water fishery and will be protected as such. The natural hydrologic conditions of the Bushkill Creek are addressed in detail in Hercules' responses to PADEP comments, et cetera, and there's a number of comments that they respond to there. Those, of course, that's where you get into the deeper hydrology report, which we're still, like I said, still digesting that. But the takeaway from that, I think, is that whether or not this stream dries up or not is not, as relevant to this application as far as maintaining some water quality. So that issue, whether it's intermittent or not, is sort of possibly becoming a moot point. I don't want to say it definitively, but that seems to be where it's going as far as the regulatory response goes. The next comment that was asked for a number of times and actually came up as one of Fish and Boat's comments as well was a stream gauge has not been installed upstream of the NPDES discharge point. So there's a number of stream monitoring stations along the stretch of the Bushkill. As part of the permit that the quarry has for discharging their quarry pumping water into the creek, they have a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit. There's water quality criteria attached to that, and they have to do sampling to maintain that quality. There's also a USGS stream monitoring station downstream as well, but through this comment period and some of the conversations that we've had, the question as far as the upstream water quality, upstream of both the quarry and also the edge of the limestone bedrock, which is where the sinkholes begin, there's not really any consistent flow monitoring or water quality monitoring upstream. So that was one request that was made by Fish and Boat, and also several comments from the public during the hearing. And Bootsy's response was that an upstream stream gauge has been used at different times for specific stages of investigation. The PA Fish and Boat Commission makes a similar comment, and Hercules provides a response to which this comment is referred. And then they go back to the larger document. And what they, again, I believe what they say in that one is essentially that they had a manual stream gauge sampling point upstream. Now that, I'm not sure what the criteria were at that station. I believe if it's a manual station, it may be a point where they go off and put it in the meter occasionally, or it may be somewhere where they send somebody out and look at a flow gauge intermittently. It may be something different. It may be a station that is 24/7 monitoring, which is really what we would like to see, I think, because that gives you the best quality data, and you can then compare it to the 24/7 gauges downstream. So you can get apples to apples comparison with the data there. So that is sort of a question that we're going to look into, and that may be one of the comments back to DEP as far as making sure that we have adequate upstream monitoring as part of the response. And then the third comment here is, and this is a significant one. This is comment number 9 in that series of 98 comments, is that a backup pumping system is required. And there are many other comments about the stream dewatering and need to maintain flow in the bush kill. Obviously, that's kind of what started the public interest in all of this, is the long-term occurrence of stream dewatering and fish kills on the bush kill there. And this is one of the positive, very positive responses I think that we've had come out of, at least, I don't know, I don't want to say it's a result of the hearing or other public efforts or something like that, but it's a good update, and that is essentially that Bootsy is, I'll just read it off here. It's an electric generating backup system is being installed by Hercules as described in Hercules' response to PADP comment number 32. They reference the groundwater report, and that the backup system will be capable of maintaining the current rate of discharge throughout the duration of any electric power supply interruption. So essentially, what I've been, in my communications with Bootsy as well, they have indicated that they have full backup generators on site. I think previously they had discussed having temporary generators brought in if there was a planned outage or something like this, but now they're planning on installing permanent on-site generators. So that should, in theory, eliminate both any planned or unplanned outages, barring some kind of catastrophic, failure of the entire system. I think those are. I don't have a definitive timeline of when they will be installed. I know that at least some of the generators are on site. When we visited the quarry some time ago, they were sitting in their storage area. I think that they're with some of the supply chain interruptions and things like that, they're having some issues getting the staff and materials there to put them in. But I believe the timeline is possibly into the fall. Initially we heard early summer, but that is sort of on their end. I'm sure that we'll hear when they're finally installed. So that was the kind of the response from the public comments. There are the 3 primary ones. Again, there's a lot of other information, which we can come back if you guys would like a more detailed report. We can see if we can come up with that. So just wrapping up from that and what's happening next, you can go into the next page there, next steps. So regarding this deepening application, PADP is currently reviewing Bootsy's response. There's no hard deadline, as far as I'm aware of, to issue another response from DEP. However, I believe it'll take at least several weeks, if not more than a month. It's, again, a very technical document, a very technical response. They're taking their time to go through it and making sure that they have a thorough consideration of it. Through that period, though, as with the previous period of DEP review, public comments are currently being accepted by DEP. So any member of the general public could comment. They can contact the Pottsville Mining Office and provide their comments to them, and DEP will consider them. And we have a couple of the member organizations from the Karst Geology Advisory Council having some of their volunteers look at it. I'm taking a brief look, as much time as I can put into reviewing it as well to see if we can come up with any potential comments. So some of the things might, the water quality monitoring is probably going to be one of them. And there's a few more, again, as we get through the details of the full report. Mm-hmm. So as far as that goes, that's an update on the status of that deepening application. The other items we're looking at going forward, I think that, again, this is a positive development that we've had from the efforts of the Advisory Council, is that DCNR, the Department of Conservation of Natural Resources, has taken interest in this as well, and have been putting together a workshop for Karst Geology workshop in May, which I believe county council members should have received an invite to. If you have not, okay, as long as it's gotten through, we'll have other members of PADP, Fish and Boat, PennDOT, the Delaware River Basin Commission, several elected officials. We're trying to get Army Corps there as well. It's a very, I think we're gonna have a lot of good people in the room and try and come up with, what's that, sorry?
That's exciting.
Yes, I think it's been a very positive development. I'm glad that DCNR is organizing this. So I think potential goals of that meeting will be, it's very preliminary, but we're trying to have 2 long-term goals, one of which, I think the primary one, is to seek to possibly put together some sort of master plan to address the sinkhole issues, flooding, and other problems. You know, we have trail issues out there and sewer line infrastructure issues as well. Ideally, I'd like to see something come out of it like what Sherry just presented, but for the Bushkill Creek corridor with the recommendations and sort of a timeline, a lot of good considerations of the challenges and solutions out there so that then we can start to pursue funding to correct the issues. That's a very long-term project. That's not going to happen in the next year, next 2 years or so. But that is, you know, once we get all these entities in the room, I think we will continue to meet. That's the ideal, to get them to have a concrete, some concrete outcomes from that work group. And then as part of that process, you know, they're looking at possible regulatory updates or ordinance updates that could be recommended or suggested from that presentation, since we're going to be looking at probably one of the hotspots for karst activity and limestone geology in the state. Possibly this might have some useful information that could be applied outside of our region as well. So. Again, there's been a lot of really good work from the volunteers that serve on the council, and I'm happy to report that we're moving forward with some of these items. So.
Yeah, that's exciting. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions? I think it's really exciting that our efforts have gotten them to put in that backup generator system, and now the dewatering events will hopefully cease. That was something that was a heavy lift, I think, for years, and I'm glad that that's actually coming to fruition, that that's achieved. And I do believe that this regional karst geology group, whatever it becomes, is going to be really helpful, because we're on that Epler formation. Mm-hmm. Karst geology is throughout this region. I'm hearing about it all the way in Allen, East Allen, into Lehigh County as well, that we have sinkhole issues. And so I think that this is really important, not just for Stockertown and Tatamy, but also this entire region to address this. So thank you for all your work, because I know you've put a lot of extra hours into this, and I really do appreciate all your efforts, so thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
The hardest working watershed specialist.
I don't know.
Listen, all right. So I want to ask, since you're all still here, Earth Day is tomorrow, right? Are there any events tomorrow in the county? Tree plantings or anything like that?
Yes, and through our partnership with Wildlands Conservancy, we have 30 volunteers coming to Wayne Grove Park at 9 or 9:30. We're planting 350 trees in the back part of our restoration area along the Hockendacker Creek. The following Friday is Arbor Day. You can add that one to the list. And we'll be doing, I believe it's 3,800 native plugs in the west side of Louismore Park. If you're familiar with that area where some of the trails come together, there's triangular areas. These native flowers, small shrubs will add to color, benefit the environment, and make the park a little bit more useful for everyone. So those are two events coming in the next 2 weeks that we do have.
Great. And what entrance of Wayne Grove?
The south side.
South side.
And if you go to the Pavilion 1 and head all the way back to where the second bridge is, you'll see all the volunteers.
That's awesome. So that's a great way to celebrate Earth Day, planting trees, they sequester carbon. It's really exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I also want to make two comments, just an update on the 303 Demi Road request by PennDOT. It was rejected. So there will not be a public hearing or traffic study on that area. And I did attend the Lehigh Valley Planning Committee, Executive Committee today. And I know that there was an article in the paper the other day about 25+ million square feet of warehouse. It's slated to go in, and we were talking about how the plans are coming in so fast that they don't have enough staff to actually review all the plans, yet they have to review the plans within 30 days. Now, this creates a real issue because then you don't have that oversight of these plans, and the municipal code at the state level prevents any kind of moratorium or any kind of like local control of that pipeline, like not a pipeline, but of the review pipeline. And this is going to be a real conundrum, I think. We're also, at that same meeting, we also discussed the retirement of Jeff Reese, who is a huge, huge part of the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. It's going to take like 4 or 5 people to replace him. And so I just want everyone to be aware that that's a real issue that we're going to be dealing with when we have, you know, the county executive coming forward and talking about warehouse proliferation and all the great land that we're trying to preserve, and at the same time, it's going out the door faster than we can ever preserve it. So I think we should all just, I'm going to put my thinking cap on and see what else I can do for this, but this is something that really disturbs me. That a lot of the land, not that the preserved land is going, but that a lot of the other open land is going to be used, not just for housing, because that would be a great thing, because we are at a deficit with housing, but it's going to be used for warehousing, and that's tough. So those are all the updates I have. I hope to see any of you at the Earth Day events. Everybody knows how much I like planting trees. I'd say if there are no other comments, we can adjourn the meeting and everybody can take a break before council. Yep, all right, meeting adjourned. Thank you so much. Hey, thank you. I'm gonna come down and talk.